Greetings, friends. My name is Jessa McLean, and I'm here to provide you with some blueprints of disruption. This weekly podcast is dedicated to amplifying the work of activists, examining power structures, and sharing the success stories from the grassroots. Through these discussions, we hope to provide folks with the tools and the inspiration they need to start to dismantle capitalism, decolonize our spaces, and bring about the political revolution that we know we need. I want to start off this episode by thanking the folks who answered the call to help Blueprints pay our bills. There's a few programs we use to record our content and get it out there, and those subscriptions really helped cover the costs. And personally, it was a big boost for me. Recording a podcast can be a little bit like speaking into the void, and we've got a really small team over here. So when people reach out and show their appreciation in all kinds of ways, it really does help keep the project going. It gave me so much energy, that we've got a bonus episode for you this week with one of my favorite guests, World Beyond War organizer Rachel Small. Some of you may have heard about the pre-dawn raids on local activist homes in the London, Ontario area. One of those homes was Rachel's, and she's here to talk about that experience, as well as the work she's doing that makes her a target of the state. You see, her work is the antithesis to that of the ruling class, who have clearly linked elbows on levels of military spending we've not seen in generations. The work of World Beyond War and the larger Arms Embargo Now movement aim to eat away at the very narratives and corporations that helped pass Carney's war budget, which is why we always offer her our warmest welcome. Welcome back to the studio, Rachel. I'm sorry you've had a few kind of hectic weeks here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Can you just explain what the experience was like? Because in the news, it's been described as, using police tactical units that are normally reserved for violent offenders. And I mean, this isn't the first time we've seen a raid on activist homes, but maybe is it the first time you've experienced one?
Yeah, it is definitely the first time that my house has been raided. So yeah, last Tuesday, they showed up at 6 a.m. Sharp and simultaneous raids at 4 different homes in 4 different cities. So, I mean, 6 a.m. this time of year, it's like pitch black. Me and my family were all very much fast asleep and woke up to like 9 or 10 cops in our house. These are not night raids. So it was 6 a.m. sharp because that's the earliest time that they can execute a raid when they don't have the warrant for kind of a night raid. But it certainly felt like a night raid based on how that played out. So I was arrested at that moment. They searched the house and seized all of my electronic equipment as well as my kids' iPad and other equipment. And it was my eldest kid's birthday, so it was a pretty rough morning on a personal note.
Your kids are about the same age as my kids, and that's immediately what I thought about. I was so angry. I tell my family, I talk about some folks, and I'm like, Rachel's house was raided, and her kids are the same age as our kids. That would be horrifying. Can I ask you how you try to explain this to children?
Yeah, I mean, my kids have had the mixed bag, but maybe I will hopefully say the blessing of like growing up always in a home that was always like a community and an activist space, and unfortunately have witnessed police violence at protests, and know that many people in our lives, including me previously, have been arrested. So I think they had some familiarity with the idea of cops arresting people who are trying to create change and who are trying to shake up the system or whatever ways it makes sense to a really young child. But I mean, there's no real way to be prepared for them being in your house in the darkness. So I think it was pretty surprising for them, but I think that they they knew that like these things happen, and you know that I would be back pretty soon, and that this is like part of what being in movements for, and the support from community and from other people across the province has been like tremendous and has meant a huge, has been super meaningful for us.
Do you prepare for this? I mean, because like I've said, we've seen this at other homes before, participation in what sometimes really innocuous actions. This one,
Mm-hmm.
we'll talk about the action that, police are focused on, but we've seen folks with their homes raided for things like just blocking the road. So how do you mentally or tactically, if you can share any of that, prepare for the possibility?
Yeah, such a good question. So I don't know if we'd prepared for them showing up while we were sleeping, to be honest, but we definitely had talked as a family and as a household before about what do you do if a cop knocks on the door, if a cop tries to talk to you, and I had that conversation with my kids and with my partner, and I think, and with housemates, and like I think that's like really a helpful thing for everyone who's involved in this stuff to do. I think sometimes people feel like talking about this stuff is scary, but in my experience, it actually reduces fear because then you sort of know, like, okay, worst case scenario, this happens. Now I have a game plan, and now I know what I would do. So what I had previously shared with my partner is that you don't open the door. And I mean, my kids in general would like know not to open the door to strangers, and cops are strangers. So just you don't open the door to strangers. You don't welcome them in, even if it's a cop saying, "Can I come in?" The answer is still no. And you go get a grown up, and for grown ups in the house to maybe ask a couple key questions like, what is this concerning? Are you here to make an arrest? Or if they're asking to come in, do you have a search warrant? The general advice, of course, is like don't talk to cops, but I think asking those questions can be really helpful in the moment to figure out kind of what is going on. We have like a friendly movement lawyers number always on like the little post-it note on our fridge, just so that people feel confident. Okay, this is someone that I can call. And if you do have like a criminal defense lawyer buddy or a movement lawyer number, and you can also actually call that person while cops are at your door and even put them on speakerphone and have them talk to the cops for you. Like these are kind of options that we have. And Council Call is a podcast that just did a few episodes, but they've got a great one. I think it's like maybe 10 minutes long about like what to do if you're contacted by police, and really just walk you as lawyers, but in like very plain, easy, accessible tips on like what to actually do in that circumstance. So I do recommend that people have that in mind. And frankly, like what we're seeing in the follow up to these raids and arrests last week is that a bunch of people, especially in the London area, are getting door knocks now, not for to be arrested or not with any kind of intention of a search warrant or anything, but cops who are wanting to ask them questions and are inviting people into the station to have conversations about the protest. And I think it's really important for people to know that you don't have to say yes to what cops are asking, and that you should never make any kind of commitment to a cop. And if they're telling you something and you're not sure you understand it, you can write it down and you can say, can I call you back? Where should I call? And then you can get a lawyer to make that call for you. Like maybe you're not certain, oh, do I have to go into the station to answer your question? Am I going to be arrested? Or is this just an invitation? You should just take down the info, find out what division that cop is from, and then get a friendly lawyer to call in for you and clarify that. I think people can kind of panic in the moment, understandably.
The charges are related to a protest in London. Tell us about that event, because it was a good one.
Yeah, so on October 21st, so I guess just over a month ago, yeah, more than 100 people showed up at the Best Defense Conference in London, Ontario. This is a conference of arms dealers. I mean, really, we were calling it a war crimes summit because this conference was being held by some of the biggest war criminals on the planet. Like we're talking about Elbit Systems and Lockheed Martin, but also tons of somewhat smaller. I mean, in General Dynamics, which has like a humongous presence in London. Like the factory is like blocks and blocks wide. I've been there. But yeah, there's also like lots and lots of smaller Canadian weapons manufacturers. So, I mean, these are some of the most notorious companies that are arming Israel, certainly, and that are like continuing to also make products in Canada that are still being exported to Israel, but also who are just like literally profiting the most off of war and bloodshed all over the world. So there was a big protest,
Naturally.
and we yeah, like I think sent a pretty strong message to those companies, like that they're not welcome in our communities, and that, you know, we see them in their fancy convention centers, and like these are where war crimes start.
Well, these are the very companies that populate the reports that you've been putting out through World Beyond War, and some of the folks that have been helping you out with that, not that very long before the raids. And I know what the charges are related to, but I find it hard to not think that you are being targeted specifically for your body of work, so to speak, exposing the Canadian government. The report I'm alluding to, the most recent one, had to do with the loopholes, but it was just a few months ago that you released the more just as explosive report on the fact that they had been lying about ceasing arms going to Israel. And so you are a huge thorn in the liberal side. We've seen them have to even comment on it, right? They're now saying that they're just admitting they're afraid of Trump and don't want any backlash. And so there's just no way that they're going to close that loophole. So we see peaceful protests often result in criminal charges in attempt to intimidate and strike fear. And one can only assume, like, these raids, the way that they're undertaken, tries to reinforce that fear. But how do you kind of explain this to other folks getting into the fray? Like, is this having a chilling effect on your comrades?
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, the link to the report is really interesting. I'm glad you brought it up. Yeah, it was exactly a week after we had released our recent report. Like that was the Tuesday before. And I'm not saying the London police who arrested us, you know, read the report. Like I don't think there's necessarily that direct a connection. But for us, for me, it feels very, very connected because yeah, there's been this really intense effort to like really expose in very specific terms what these companies are complicit in. And it's like literally Canadian weapons being used in like the worst war crimes on the planet. And that report was, of course, in terms of Canadian weapons being used in Israel's genocide, but like we're also there's also incredible investigations happening around Canadian weapons being used in Sudan, being used by ICE. Like this is also a global problem, and yet, of course, it's us trying to keep the war criminals out of their fancy meetings in London, and it's the like full brunt power and endless resources of the state that's going after and criminalizing us. But yeah, this, I mean, I think you're right that it's absolutely about instilling fear. Yeah, if you oppose these genocide profiteers, and I should say also like the Canadian government, there were tons of Canadian government reps and like people, uniformed soldiers in attendance at this event as well. The Legal Support Committee just put out some really interesting numbers, like data that they've been compiling as they support people of, this is just in the Toronto area in their case, but that there's now been over 166 arrests of Palestine supporters in Toronto in the past 2 years. But what they also highlight is like, it's really the process that is the punishment. Like for many people, it feels very scary to be charged, but in the vast majority of cases, the charges go away within several kind of annoying months of working through a really slow and inefficient and frankly stupid court process. But the process is the problem. Like these, I mean, in the case of like home raids or people's devices getting seized, like that's expensive and scary and annoying, and like a real violation of your home space. But even where that's not happening, often we have conditions put on us while the charges are pending. So in our case, we all have non-association conditions with each other, which is like very hard to organize collective defense and like to work together as a group of people arrested when you're not allowed to communicate with each other in any way. But there's also conditions that some in our group are dealing with, like curfews and like things that really hinder your life or your ability to like go home and visit family for the holidays. Like
And certainly
it really
organize.
messes with your life. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like so to go back to what the legal support committee highlighted, like it's now, I think, what did they say? 84 out of those 166 people have already had all their charges resolved. The vast majority of those like full withdrawals, or the rest have received discharges. There's only one who has been convicted. So we're talking about basically no one. I mean, one person counts, but like a very, very tiny percentage who end up with any kind of a criminal record. Even, we're not talking really about like jail time at all. Like, we're talking about charges that disappear. That said, like, we have some power here in terms of how do we respond to these efforts to like isolate us and to criminalize us. And like, do we instead come together and support each other? Do we instead insist that like, okay, nobody who's being criminalized, like, we actually won't let you be isolated, even if you can't be in touch with your fellow arrestees. Like, we're going to have support committees. Like, we're going to make sure people have food. We're going to help you get new phones. We're going to collectively fundraise for people's legal defense. We're going to get a movement lawyer. We're going to, like, the ways we show up to here matter, not just for people's individual okayness through these process, but also if the process is the punishment, if we can make the process better, then we're actually taking away the state's power here.
Absolutely. I will link the episode for folks to hear in detail the legal support committee talk about the networks that they've created of the arrestees. And that was months and months and months ago, maybe even a year ago now. So I can only imagine the lessons that have been learned and the connections that have been made, you know, outside the no contact bail restrictions have really only strengthened the movement. So I do love when we get to tell stories, although they sound horrible at the outset. They are proof that, like, despite all of these awful tactics being deployed against us, it's actually just bringing people closer together, right? No matter how hard they try to drive folks apart or send them underground, or silence them, folks are really pushing back. I wonder
Can I say
if,
one more thing about
yes,
that pushback?
please.
Because also we know that this is a moment where the Canadian government is trying to push through like a whole bunch of new laws that will strengthen policing and criminalization and border militarization. And they're also trying to quadruple the Canadian military budget. And like, these fights are all, I would say, part of the same struggle and are deeply important. And of course, this is a moment where, despite a supposed ceasefire, like, the bombs have not stopped falling on Palestine. And like, I think that people are doing a really good job right now of like refusing to turn away, like refusing. Like, there's a, I think it's a Steve Bannon term, like flooding the zone. Like, that's clearly what the Carney government is doing right now in terms of trying to overwhelm us all with so many attacks at once. But I'm not seeing people splinter off or sort of say, oh, well, we're under attack and I don't have the resources to support anyone else. Like, I'm being pleasantly surprised by seeing people sort of recognize this moment for what it is. And a really shitty budget passed just this past month, but that's where the struggle like starts, right? That's not where it stops. Now we need to make it impossible for Carney and their government to do what they're currently trying to do, from the law changes, from the attacks on migrants, etc., to just the truly historic, like, quadrupling the military budget is insane, and it's like the type of spending we haven't seen since like World War II on the military. Like, it's really crazy. Frankly, like, the people attending the Best Defense Conference in London were like salivating at the opportunities for just this huge windfall of money. Yeah.
They are probably the happiest bunch coming out of that budget, and it's one of the numbers that it really isn't being challenged enough. So, you know, silencing the anti-war movement is probably high up on the agenda for Carney, because it really goes at his entire approach, right? Nationalism, militarism. He is banking a lot on that and trying to sell it to the public. So, very relieved to see work like this going on. Carney having to show his face in this budget and exposing him in the reports. I tie that to the police reports that are coming out about these raids. I feel like the police are acting so ridiculous that it's outing themselves. And I think it's best personified by the bullet points that I saw attached to, I think, like CTV, so I'm talking mainstream media reporting on these arrests as best they can, right? And it's really just regurgitating a police report because they're not calling you for comment. And so
No, they haven't called us for comment, and that's really telling because they covered our protest the day of very well, and they interviewed us all. I was a media spokesman. I was front center on camera the day of. They have our contact numbers. They clearly could have contacted us. I believe only CBC reached out to us for comment. So yeah.
I'll have to look for the CBC piece, and I'll link it if I can find it. But so back to the bullet points, it was like, police arrest protesters for this. They don't even describe any kind of chaos for a protest in London. Didn't get a lot of details. They do mention it's an arms industry, so it's kind of like, all right. And then it's like, but police, they recovered the following. And, you normally read this and it's like a list of weapons and drugs and paraphernalia that like make the arrestees look bad, but it's quite literally a list of things that everyone has in their house, except maybe the like handwritten notes on police formations or something like that. Like they try to make it seem like you couldn't collect information on police, like that was the nefarious part. But it was just like laptop, computers, cell phones, kids' iTablet, and it's just like you're reading this and going, and when am I going to get to the part of why they're actually been arrested? And like, they don't offer any of that. It's like this 2-paragraph blurb, but I'm just like, the police, even an outlier looking at this kind of police release is going to go, what? What are they arrested for? What are you doing? And there's a few court cases going on right now that just like have people scratching their head, but it all makes sense once you start discussing the punishment of process, right? Or, the hopes of setting some sort of precedent that you do get a conviction and set a new set of rules on what we can and can't do. But, I just thought it looked really ridiculous. Like, it was such a stretch. Like, why did they even release that bullet points? Like, we found nothing.
They literally took my kid's iPad. I mean, it's pretty rude.
Playing Plants vs. Zombies back at the station.
It's like Disney movies on it. That's like for a 3-year-old. It's ridiculous.
I'm glad that you can smile and we can make small jokes about it now, but I was mortified and so angry to hear that. I do appreciate you coming on to kind of share that experience, but even more so the tips and the resiliency, because I think, people who maybe read some of these stories, it might scare them if they don't understand the community that's there for them, and the process is half of it, right? So if you can just make it through that, you'll be
and if
fine.
Folks have a little bit of spare change to donate it to the Toronto Community Justice Fund would be really appreciated, because they're pretty much out of money right now, and there's been a lot of arrests in Toronto recently.
Okay, so I will link, if you look in the show notes, there'll be a call to action button, and that will link you to the Toronto Community Justice Fund. And what we'll do here at the show is we'll donate half of our monthly subscriptions for December to the legal fund as well. So I encourage folks to do that, because I don't know how many of our guests have been on the show and have touted the work of this group and the amount of resources we've leaned on coming out of the people connected to that. So I do encourage folks to support it and World Beyond War's work, because it is ongoing. We got to get you a new laptop.
Yeah, we'll be sharing updates on, World Beyond War Canada on Instagram and Twitter and all those other places. So stay tuned. I hope there will not be updates of any additional arrests, though. I mean, when they seize a whole bunch of laptops and phones, it's like with intents to escalate and to additionally criminalize or maybe lay more charges on us. It's hard to speculate, but we'll keep folks updated on this, and hopefully not too long we'll have a nice update to share about all our charges are dropped, and there'll be ongoing plans to protest and do all kinds of things in the next few months regardless.
Yeah, it's going to take a little more than that to keep you down. I'm looking forward to the quintessential outside the courthouse photo if it gets that far. Hopefully you don't even have to go that far, Rachel. But all the best to you and your comrades at World Beyond War.
Thanks, Tessa.
That is a wrap on another episode of Blueprints of Disruption. Thank you for joining us. You can follow us on Twitter at BP of Disruption, If you'd like to help us continue disrupting the status quo, please share our content, and if you have the means, consider becoming a patron. Not only does our support come from the progressive community, so does our content. So reach out to us and let us know what or who we should be amplifying. So until next time, keep disrupting.